Hello everyone, I'm Jane, and today we are doing our first live mystery painting. So this is my first time doing a live video, like a fully live video, so I'm not a tech guy and I'm pushing all the buttons and everything by myself, so please excuse weirdnesses that happen. So unless you're watching this video on Sunday, May 6th, right at this moment, you're probably not watching it live. But if all goes well, and so far we're struggling a little bit. If all goes well, we might do more of these in the future. So I can tell you that we are doing a barn in a stormy kind of a setting. So you can check out the video description below for a full list of materials, as well as the reference image that I used for just the barn part of this painting. So if I can push all of the right buttons from here on out, I think we are ready to get started. So we have our 8x10 canvas, and we can go ahead and get started. As you can tell, today I'm back on the paper plates because my glass palette won't fit over here under my camera, and I only have the ability to hook up one camera at a time for live. So that's why we're on the paper plate today. So we're going to start out by doing a stormy sky, because you know how I am. I like me some stormy skies. So I'm going to put out some phthalo blue. See, I normally edit out all of this part, screwing the lids back onto my tube so you guys don't have to get bored watching that. And you get to see me struggle to open the ones that never want to open. I'm going to put out some titanium white. Notice I have quite a bit of blue there. I'm going to use blue throughout a good portion of this painting, and some Mars black. And I'm probably going to use almost as much Mars black as I'm going to use of phthalo blue. So if you are watching this live in the chat room right now, I can't see you just yet, but I will pop back and forth and make sure I'm getting to your questions. So I'm going to start with my number 6 cloud brush. Can you see that? No, you just see my Scream Band-Aid. It's artsy. All right, so I am using this brush dry. And the reason I'm using it dry is sometimes when I use it wet, I feel like it smears the paint too much, and then I get brush lines, and then I spend a lot of time kind of messing with that. So when it's dry, then I feel like it spreads the paint a little bit nicer and smoother, and there's an eyelash stuck to my canvas. I have not gessoed this canvas board at all. So I'm going to start by just coming in and grabbing the tiniest amount of blue that I can. Can you see how much blue I grabbed there? It's just the itty bittiest. And I'm going to do the same thing with black. Just the teeny tiniest amount. I want the top of the sky to be very light, but I don't want it to be pure white. See how I even wiped quite a bit of that off of my brush. And then I'm going to get a good amount of white. So I picked up kind of a good sized ball of white there. Now I'm going to be laying this down across the top. So I'm going to use about 1/2 foot pressure. So if you've painted with me for a while, you know that we have some different types of pressure, and I use foot analogies a lot for all of them. So tippy toe pressure, if you're standing up on your tippy toe, that's like that, okay? If you are standing flat with your toes and your heel on the ground, then you're standing like that. But if you kind of rock forward a little bit so that you're on the front half of your foot, then you're about like that, and that is 1/2 foot pressure, okay? So let's zoom in here a little bit. We might have to move my face. Okay, so 1/2 foot pressure. I'm just kind of doing little circles. See how much of that blue and black is showing, even though I wiped most of it off? Mars black and phthalo blue are very, very strong colors. So if you pick up too much of them, the top of your sky is going to be too dark, and I almost feel like that's a little too dark. Is this a little too bright? Whoop, That was way too bright. Let's try it right there for a minute. So I'm going to grab some more white, another little ball of white. And if that's too dark, I can come and add some of the white to it later. For now, I'm just going to kind of keep going. And I keep the same pressure as I move into that previous color. See that? That's what's going to help me keep a nice smooth blend. Sometimes when we do things like this, and it's hard to demonstrate now because these colors are pretty close, but I'll show you when we get into the darker colors. Sometimes when we do things like this, I feel like we get afraid to go into a previous section that we just did. So it'll probably show right here. So let me show you. So we might start here and everything's going good. And then we get to that previous color and we don't know what to do. So we kind of like bump up against it like that and leave it. And then we have a weird line. Don't be afraid. Just pretend like it's not there. If you're not picking up way too much paint, it easily blends into it without a line. So I'll kind of show you what would be too much paint versus just right. So let's just get rid of that line because I made one, and so now it's stuck there. So to get rid of it, can you see how I'm just like twirling my brush? That kind of helps get rid of the line. All right, so here is about enough paint. See, it's like a little ball on the end. You don't want to do that. That's way too much paint. Way too much paint. Always start outside. So this, I know you can't really tell because it's really light. This is about where my white paint starts. So if I'm changing colors right now, I don't want to put my brush right on that line because I'm going to lose all of that. So we always start outside of it. So I'm about an inch away from where that previous color stopped, laying down the bulk of the paint, and then I can take it into that previous color. It will all be a little more obvious in just a second once I've got the top all covered. I'm just going to lighten this a little bit, take some of that leftover white that was on my brush and just get that in there. All right, let's go a bit darker and then you guys can actually see what I'm doing. So again, I'm going to go into my blue. I'm just touching, got out a tiny bit, but it's a little bit more than last time. Into the black. And I'm going to get about the same amount of white. So let's see. Our white stops right about here. So I'm going to start right about here, about an inch below it. Still that 1/2 foot pressure. Just laying down the color, making sure there's no ridges. If you have like a bulk of paint there and you try to blend it into the next color, you're really just going to smear it. So keep doing that until you don't have any like little paint ridges. And now I can keep that same pressure and take it right up into the previous color. Even if the previous color is dry, it's not a big deal because we are going to do a little bit of some clouds. So if you have a ridge that's really ugly, like I don't really like that ridge, I'm not going to worry about it because I will be able to fix it later on. So let's keep going with roughly that same mixture. Sometimes it'll be a little darker, sometimes it'll be a little lighter, but it's a stormy sky, so that doesn't really matter, right? A stormy sky wouldn't have this perfect, perfect fade from white to dark. There might be little areas even within the light area that's quite a bit darker and vice versa. There I am releasing my pressure just a little bit, kind of up onto the toe, since those colors are so different. We got a question in the chat, am I using heavy body paint? I am, but that doesn't necessarily matter with these colors anyway. The only colors, so I get asked a lot, should I upgrade to heavy body? Is basics okay? All of that. Basics is perfectly fine. Hang on real quick. We're just going to come in and grab a tiny speck of white. You see how much I used? And I really want to get rid of this line right now. So I'm going to go right on top of that line. See where I put that white? And I'm going to do the same type of brush stroke. This kind of helps to blend it in a bit and give us a little cloud top. Basics is perfectly fine. It's a good quality paint. I still use Basics, but you know, lately I have been using my heavy bodies a little bit more. If you are curious about the heavy body paints, I would recommend that you upgrade all of your cadmiums. In fact, even if you're not necessarily interested in moving up into using heavy body solely, I would upgrade all of your cadmiums, your cadmium yellow, orange, red. And that's because the Basics cadmium colors are very transparent. In the last video we just did the vase, again just a tiny point to get rid of some of these lines. The rustic flowers in the vase, I had a lot of people tell me that their orange didn't show up, and it was because they were using Basics. They're just so super transparent, but the heavy body Basics are opaque. They will cover black. They are very opaque, so they're awesome. I don't think you necessarily need to go and, upgrade all of your paints, especially if you're, just new or you have a limited budget. But I think that you'll find that you have a lot less frustration using your reds and yellows and such if you use the heavy bodies. I'm still just taking these little points of white to get rid of some of these lines. I'm really not overly concerned with them. I know that looks kind of weird right now, but it's setting the stage for what we're going to do later with the clouds. Let's go darker still. By the time we get about 2/3 of the way down, so right about here, I want to be using nothing but the black and blue. So that's kind of what I'm aiming for here. Let's move that up a bit. So I'm going to get a little bit more blue. See how I pulled some out? Quite a bit more blue and black than last time. Still going to wipe a little bit of it off. About the same amount of white. That might be too light. I might go a little bit darker than that. But notice I decided that's too light, but I didn't stop in the middle of what I was doing to change it. I know that sometimes, when we do something we don't like, we're like, oh, I have to fix that immediately. I have to fix it right now. But I think that if you do that, sometimes it kind of throws off what you're doing. And then you end up with one spot that looks a little bit different than everything else. So I'm just going to grab a bit more of that black blue. It's really just a smear. My camera won't focus. There we go. See, there's no blob. It's just a smear. I'll just put a tiny bit more in there. And like I said, we can have lighter and darker areas in everything. We just generally want to move darker as we go down. I'm going to pick up less white this time. See how that is. That might be too dark, but that's okay. No, that's all right. I am doing a little bit of that kind of pirouette motion. This canvas has quite a bit of texture on it, which is good because then I don't have to use gesso, and it helps me get a nice foggy effect with this brush and this technique, but it also kind of makes digging down into the texture a little bit of a challenge sometimes. So Vince is watching chat and kind of fielding questions, and I'll pop over there in a minute. Do we have any questions right now, Vince, that I need to address? Nothing yet. Okay. And hopefully, if you're not watching this live, hopefully you can still see the chat so you can see some of the questions that come through and, not feel like you got left out of the party. You can even get like super creative with this and, put your light source like up in one area. So by light source, I mean the lightest part of the sky here. Kind of put it up in one area at an angle, whatever you want to do. I'm going to get just a little point of white, just break up some of those. So what I'm doing here is, I think it's probably pretty similar to the smoky background technique that we did a long time ago. I'm just being a little bit more selective about where I put the colors. And also notice that sometimes my colors are a little more on the black side. So here I feel like I've got a little bit more black. Sometimes they're a little more on the blue side. I don't want you to struggle with anything like that. A few weeks ago, we had a conversation in one of the Patreon YouTube sponsor viewing parties, where a lot of people were saying that, you know, if they want a certain color, they'll mix it all up and then, you know, use it to fill in a section or whatever, you know, rather than like the way I do it, where I just kind of pick up the colors as I go. And I think that, to me, that kind of, it makes things look a little bit more flat, and I don't want to say unrealistic, but a little bit. You know, I like when there's some variation, just a little point of white, a little bit of variation, because everything has variation to its color. Even something that is, you know, solidly one color. Like if you look at the wall behind me, I think I used this analogy before in last week's video, but, you know, these walls are painted white. They're painted pure white, but they don't look pure white. Every section of the wall behind me is a little bit of a different color. And so if you're going to paint like a room and you want the room to have white walls, you wouldn't necessarily just smear white paint all over the canvas where you want a wall, because it's just going to look kind of flat. See how I left some of that white showing, and we're starting to get a little bit of the look of some cloud tops. And we're going to amp that up a little bit later, but I just want to kind of kick out some of these parts that I feel like are bothering me just a little bit. I feel like I'm super talkative right now. You know, a lot of times when I'm recording, I think, oh, I'll just put this part into time lapse. I don't have anything to say, and they've seen me do this. But I don't have that right now, so I have to keep talking and try to be interesting for you guys, right? I think that's about as far as I'm going to go with the lighter blue. So now I'm just going to go into my blue-black. There's still white on my brush, so it won't be, you know, pure black. Pull out some blue, pull out some black, kind of mix them together. And it's a little less paint on my brush than when I was picking up white. So remember when I picked up white and I kind of had a ball? I don't have quite that much paint on my brush this time, so we'll work in smaller sections. But same thing, just kind of that half-foot pressure. See how I started outside of that color, not touching it, spreading that paint until there's no ridges in it, and then take it up into that previous section. Don't be afraid to get it up in there. You don't have to get right up to it, cover all the white spots, and then go, okay, that's it, and stop, because you'll still have a line. Break that line up. I'm going to go tippy-toe because it helps dig into the texture of the canvas a bit. And even here, if I have a spot where I don't like a line between them, I can still go and grab a little point of white to kind of soften it like we did up in here. But for now, I'm just going to keep going with my dark color. I love what phthalo blue and black do when you mix them together. You get such a rich, dark color, like a navy blue. There we go. Across the other side. Maybe I'll pick up a little bit more so we can cover a bit more area. I think I'm going to pick up just the tiniest point of white, just because there's some over here, and I don't want it to be black on this side and have the white over there. So get rid of all those ridges. A little ridge right there. Dig into that texture. And now back to flat foot. Take it up into the previous section. So I don't think I explained it, and you guys haven't seen the image that we're doing. But right here where this is kind of ugly, it's not a great blend. Don't struggle with that because those are going to be cloud tops. So that's why I'm okay having kind of a weird transition line there. I kind of like that. It's a little brighter right there, a little bright spot. So I think I'm going to leave that. A little bit more. We'll finish up the other side. Tiny point of white. Whoa. Another thing I would typically edit out in a regular video. That stuff happens to me all the time. And sometimes it's really noisy at my studio. So if you hear like a car tearing up and down the street, also things I typically edit out. There we go. Sorry, this is the number 6 cloud brush. If you're doing this on a larger canvas, like a 12 by 16 like we usually do, then I would use the number 12 and then use the number 6 for the next part. But on a 5 by 7, which is what I was originally going to do, and on 8 by 10 like I'm doing now, the number 6 I feel like is the perfect size. I'm going to get rid of that little spot. I don't really like it. So I'm just getting, you see that? It's like a pinpoint of white, the tiniest amount of white I can possibly get. I'm just going to kind of get rid of this little spot right here. I'm not worried about getting a perfect blend. I kind of like that it's a little bit lighter. Now it almost indicates like a little cloud top again. Let's do that actually through a couple of parts here, and then we'll finish the bottom part of the canvas. Tiny, tiny. If you pick up too much white here, then you're going to end up just kind of painting over all of your clouds. Just a pinpoint is really all you need. I guess I can really save the rest of these for when we go down to the smaller brush and really start amping up the clouds. Let's clean off that brush because I'm done with it for now. I don't know if I've shown you guys before. I actually keep 2 jars of, well, I keep 3 jars now. So one so you can see when I'm dipping into water. But I keep 2 jars. So this one I wash brushes in. So when a brush has paint on it, I come in here and I immediately wash it. Like I said, the longest your brush should sit in water is just long enough to wash it. So I wash in here. And then I rinse in here. So the exact same thing. And that's to prevent, you know, that wash jar is going to get really gross by the end of a painting. So this just helps make sure that the brush is as clean as possible. So now I'm going to go to my, it's upside down, my 1/2-inch flat brush. And I'm going to wet it in my jar. Just wipe it on the edge like that. And I'm just going to pick up blue and black, a good amount. I'm going to fill in the rest of the canvas with this blue-black mixture. It doesn't matter if it leans more blue or if it leans more black. Good amount of paint. And let's make sure you can see it. Just start filling it in. Doesn't matter if it's, you know, straight side to side, whatever you have to do. Right here where it meets that previous, I am kind of taking it up under the corner. Can you see that? I'm kind of doing like that, just to kind of dust it into those clouds. There might be a little bit of a line there, so I can just smear it with my finger. There. Or you could just use the number 6 and scrub all the way to the bottom if you like. That's okay too. My arm gets tired after scrubbing for a long time. So if I can do part of it without scrubbing, you know, minimize the workout on my arm a bit, then I will. Because I'm lazy. I mean, I'm efficient, not lazy. Efficient. So if you're going through here and your paint stops spreading so well, I get a lot of questions like, how do you keep your paint so smooth? And I don't really understand that question. So I'll try and address it when I think, you know, oh, this might be what they're asking about. But if your paint isn't spreading properly anymore, then just get your water and just kind of dip the corner. You probably can't see that real well. Just the corner. I did not dunk my brush into the water. I don't want my brush to be soaking, but just a teeny point of water will help get the paint to spread a little bit better. So once I'm done with this part, we need to let this dry for a minute. So I will jump over to chat when I'm done here and get some questions going. So if you have a question, now's the time. Make sure you put it in all caps so that I can see it, and I will get to it. I'm just going to let this dry for maybe 5 minutes or so. Don't worry about brush marks. If you can see I've got some brush marks there. We're going to paint over this anyway. I just want this dark underpainting for the next part. Okay, clean off my brush. And we will go over and do some questions while that dries for just a minute. Oh, you guys are enjoying the live. Good, good, good. Because I'm super nervous, so, you know. Let's see, what do we have? Looks like you guys don't have any questions about what we're doing right now. Do I use a blow dryer to paint faster? Sometimes. It depends. It depends on what I have going on. Not usually when I'm recording videos, because you know, there's always something else I can be doing while it dries. But if I'm being super impatient, then yeah, I'll get a blow dryer to dry it a little bit faster. And that's it. No other questions, just that you guys are really enjoying live. Good. I'm so glad to hear that. So glad to hear that. Let's go back, because actually we are not going to be painting on the ground just yet. So that can dry for a few more minutes. We need to finish up our sky. And I think, let's see, I think I'm going to move my mug down here. That'll just be a little bit easier for me. All right. Now I'm going to go to I do that every time, don't I? Upside down. My number 4. Hello, there we go. Number 4 cloud brush, the little guy. And it is dry again. So we're going to add some cloud tops. Now I'm going to come into this blue-black mixture, and I'm just lightly, that might be a little much. Can you see how much is there? You can't. You can tell that there's the tiniest point on there. There's almost none. And I'm just going to kind of scrub it off right there. Again, I just don't want this to be pure white, but pretty white. So just a little ball of paint. It's not a crazy amount. And I'm going to come into some of these areas where I can see the transition between the colors. Now here's, I don't know, maybe this won't make sense to you. This is kind of how I envision doing cloud tops. So I hope this makes sense. If you notice, there's no paint on this side of my brush, but it's on this side of my brush. Now, when I'm doing cloud tops, if I take that paint and just kind of plop it right there, it's really going to stay there, and then I'm going to have to like scrub to get it to move around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my brush like this. So it's kind of, if this were a flat brush, I don't know if this will make sense. If this were a flat brush, see I've pinched it flat, no paint there, paint there. I'm going to use the edge so that half of the paint is on the canvas and half of the side with no paint is on the canvas. And then I'm going to kind of roll it toward the painted side. That might not make sense. Let me know if that made any amount of sense at all. Vince, will you let me know if that made any kind of sense to everybody? If they comment. Yeah, we're going to talk about worms, guys. See, I'm taking it outside of that shape. Just because you have a shape doesn't mean you have to stick to that shape. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's get some more. Again, I only loaded it on one side. That painted side is half on and half off my canvas. And I'm going to kind of roll. See how I brought it back down? Back up. And I'm still using the 1/2 foot pressure. And what that 1/2 foot pressure is going to do is see how I have a nice crisp edge there, but at the bottom I don't. It just, knock my plate around again, it just fades. That's from the 1/2 foot pressure. So we talk about worm clouds a lot. And the reason we talk about them a lot is because I still have a lot of people tell me that their clouds look like worms and they don't know how to get away from it. When I see worm clouds, they're almost always, you know, just shaped, they're just a straight line. And you can tell that they tried to like take parts of it out. Don't think, it's not a line. It's a random shape. So 1/2 foot pressure, and watch, I'm gonna come up. I'm gonna bring it down here. I'm even gonna turn my brush the other way and bring it back in. See, there's no worm there. No worm at all. Just kind of dust out that bottom line there. Let's do it again. Just get super random. See, just because you came from this direction and went this direction doesn't mean you can't go back that direction, but in a different place, of course. And remember when I said, you don't have to stick to these top shapes that you see. This part, there's a top shape here and top shape here, but this part seems kind of boring to me. So I'm just going to say there's a little cloud top in there. And I'm going to bring it up and it connects with that one somehow. I'm going to go full foot pressure there just to get rid of that line. See, now there's a cloud shape in there that wasn't there before. If you get a spot where you feel like that just looks weird, like I feel like it's a little too white down inside, then again, I'm just going to pick up that teensy, tiny, eensy, weensy little speck of that dark color. I'm just going to tap it there, make sure I don't have too much. And now, with tippy toe pressure, see, I can just kind of scratch into that. And now it's not white too far down. If it's a little darker than the color you already have there, I think that's fine, because then it just says it's a little bit of a shadow in a lighter area. So let's finish up this top section. I know that it's hard to see here because it is so light. So we'll do this part quick, and then you'll be able to see a little bit better in the darker area below. Do we have questions about clouds? Any questions? Nothing yet? Okay. Katrina's having a hard time? What's going on? Almost done. We just have this one little part. See, again, that was a big section there. So I'm just kind of scrubbing a bit of that white down into there. This is going to be awesome stormy sky. Like, I'm not a big fan of summer. I don't like to be hot. I hate it when it's just nothing but hot and sunny for days on end. I'm a rainy type girl. But one thing that we get here anyway in the summer that we don't get any other time of the year are these incredible storms where, you know, you get the super dark sky. It almost looks like it's night, even if it's the middle of the day. But then like a bit of the sky will break and the sun comes shining through. So you have these dark, dark clouds, and like all the grass and trees are just like on fire, this bright, intense green. And that's kind of what I wanted to go for in this painting. So that's why we're doing the super dark, stormy sky. I promise it's not going to be all a dark painting. All right, so let's go over that one more time. Maybe you can see a little bit better. So I loaded a little bit of white on one side of my brush. I have a little bit of white from everything else, but I only picked up white on one side of my brush, not the other. When I set this brush on the canvas, I am not going to put that side that I loaded the white on, I'm not putting that on the canvas because that paint, it now lives right there in that spot, and it's going to be really hard to move around. Instead, I'm going to hold it so the paint that's loaded is kind of facing this direction. So if it helps you to understand this, I think this is what Katrina was asking. I hope this is what she was asking. That's what I'm getting to. Kind of pinch your brush flat a little bit if this helps you. Paint on one side, no paint on the other side. Now when I set this on my canvas, I'm going to put the edge, not one of the flat sides, the edge. So can you see that? That might be really confusing, and I apologize. So now I'm moving toward where the paint is loaded. It's on this side of my brush. I'm moving toward it. And I'm kind of, as I go, I'm kind of rolling my brush a little bit. So watch my fingers and my little screen Band-Aid. I cut myself the other day. It's not serious, but it's just irritating. So as I'm going, I'm kind of rolling just lightly. See that? So if you watch here, you can see how much it's rolling. I'm kind of pushing it just a little bit as I move along. I'm not doing one of these things. I'm not, you know, spiraling out of control. It's just a very gentle push like that. So that paint that's loaded right here, as I go, I'm not just sweeping across and using all the paint on the bottom. I'm kind of rolling into it as I move across the shape that I want to highlight. So let me show you again. Katrina, let me know if that makes more sense to you. Again, no paint loaded over here, paint on this side. It's facing the left. So I'm going to start here, kind of nudging it, gently rolling my brush toward that paint, the paint load as I go. And that is way too dramatic of a color difference. So I'm going to grab a tiny bit of my darker color and just kind of nudge it back up into there. Easy, gone, gone. We're not going to spend, you know, a million years on these clouds. We've done some pretty intense clouds before. If you're interested in doing a much more intense sky of clouds and, you know, you're comfortable with that, absolutely go for it. The clouds are not really the focal point of my painting. So I just want to make sure that we understand these are clouds in a stormy sky, but I don't want you to come to the painting and be like, it's a painting of clouds. Oh, let's see, I got a worm. Let's take care of that worm. This is getting kind of dry. Ooh, that was a bit much. Tiny, tiny bit of my darker color. Same exact type of brush stroke. Just nudge it underneath there. There we go. All right, we have a question. What is our question? They kind of do. Oh, sorry. Atra wants to know if the colors are supposed to go all the way to the ground. So they kind of do. So our ground is going to be, you know, down here where it's super dark. So the clouds kind of are going to be blending into the horizon a bit. I know this is probably kind of challenging for you guys because you haven't even seen like a final version of what we're painting. You just have to like trust me that I'm not leading you down a path of weirdness, which I very well may be. That remains to be seen. It doesn't happen often, you know, maybe twice a year. Every once in a while, you know, I start recording and I just don't like what's going on and I have to stop and then I start over. I just picked up some of that darker color to get rid of that little worm shape. So yeah, every once in a while I'll start recording and I'm like, ugh, that's awful. And then I'll stop and start recording again. And like I said, that doesn't happen often, but it happens often enough that I'm kind of nervous about going live because I'm like, what if that happens while I'm painting live? And I'm like, sorry guys, we're going to start over because this looks horrible. All right, we're going to do just a little bit down here in the dark area. I don't want to do a whole lot, but I also don't want to do pure white because that is so dark. So I'm going to come in here, grab a little bit of this dark color and twirl it into the end of my brush. Can you see there's really not a lot of paint? That's a very thin, see there's not a lot even coming off of my brush. But that's going to help prevent these cloud tops from being pure white on these darker clouds. We just want to give an indication of some light through here. Get rid of some of these worm bottoms. I think that sometimes highlighting dark clouds is a little bit more challenging because you have such a dramatic difference in the colors. But don't let that discourage you. You just have to know how to go back and blend. Okay, see that? No worm. It's very random movement. Very, very random. So I'm going to start there, kind of pop it up a bit, back down, over there. A little bit more dark. Scrub out that bottom. I think we're almost done with the sky. I'm not going to do, like I said, I'm not going to get crazy with these. Just to indicate some highlights. Oh, I forgot about that ugly little thing right there. That was not what I wanted. See, so don't be afraid. I know that clouds seem intimidating. I remember when I was learning how to paint clouds, and I remember thinking, I'm never going to get this. These things are impossible. But it's just, it really is just like when we highlight anything. You can change anything. Just because you do something doesn't mean you're stuck with it. If it's too light, make it darker. If it's too dark, make it lighter. Almost done. One more part. A little spot right in there. See, that's just way too scribbled out and fuzzy. But notice I didn't drop everything to fix it or anything. I'm just indicating where I want a little hint of that highlight color, and then I can come back in, get a tiny amount of my dark color, tiny amount, scribble out anything I don't like. I do actually like painting with a camera right here so I can look over at the screen, because you know how I've told you guys lots of times, if you're unsure of what it is that you're doing, if you're unsure what you want to do next or how the whole painting looks together, take a picture of it and walk away. Well, I've kind of got that here where I can look over at my computer and see it, and seeing it in a different way than I see it standing here over it, it does help me kind of gauge that. I think I need just a little bit right there. And then for reals, we're done with this guy. Where did I see that? Right there. Sometimes you can see things in an image that you can't really see standing there looking at it. I didn't really see that little spot until I looked at it on my computer screen. I think that's almost perfect. Well, not perfect. Remember, there's no such thing as perfect. Perfect doesn't exist. Let's not get hung up on perfect. Okay, I am going to go back to here while I clean my brush, and we'll jump over to the chat room and see if we have any questions. Let's see, it looks like we have a couple. So I'm going to scroll through them real quick. Or let it dry and redo it. Exactly, Pat. You can always let it dry and redo it. You know, that's one other thing I want to talk about. This ground is still just a little bit tacky. I want to wait until that's pretty dry. One other thing I want to talk about along those lines about let it dry and redo it is, I know that a lot of times when you watch tutorials and you see me or anyone else, you know, knock out a painting in an hour, hour and a half, whatever, and you might even see us making decisions in that time, and it feels like this is how I should paint. I should be able to sit down, knock out a painting in an hour, hour and a half, and have it come out right the first time. But what you need to understand is that's not how it works. I mean, yeah, it can work like that. It's not to say you will never do that, but I'm sure I'm not alone in this. When I am coming up with a painting for each week, it takes a lot of time. I have to do some planning. I go through a ton of canvas and paper, you know, working on little bits of the painting, working out the whole painting, deciding I don't like something about it, starting over, doing it again, making changes, starting over, doing it again, making changes. And, you know, I never sit down and think, okay, I have to get this right the first time, except today, of course, I have to get this right the first time. But I've painted this several times, you know, so you need to understand that just because you see us knocking out a painting in one sitting, that doesn't mean that that's the expectation for you. You know, if you have a painting that you want to do, please don't try and do that painting, do something you don't like and decide, well, I messed it up, and just be done with it. Finish it. It doesn't matter if you hate a part of it. Just finish the painting. Then stand back and look at it and say, okay, I like this, I like this, I like this, I don't like this, I hate this, I would like this better. And go and do it again. Every time you do it again, it's going to get a little bit better. It's going to get a little bit easier. And by the time you are done, like you're actually finished, you're going to have a much nicer painting because you put that time and energy into it than if you were to just sit down for an hour and a half and try and blast out that painting. So I wanted to tell you guys that because I hear things like that all the time about, you know, you make it look so easy. Well, I think I make it look so easy because I do it a lot every single day and I paint the same thing over and over. So if you did that, you would be able to make it look really easy too. So, and we have some rant emojis. Yay! All right, let's go ahead, make sure I did not miss any questions. Let's go ahead and go back because it's dry to the touch, so that should be good. I'm gonna move my face up here and we will start on the ground. So I've still got some of my black and phthalo blue. I think I'm gonna put out just a tiny bit more phthalo blue. These parts make me nervous. So I'm like, they're gonna get bored watching you squeeze paint out of a tube, which is why you never see me do that in videos. All right, and a little bit of cadmium yellow medium. Now again, the cadmium yellow in heavy body is super opaque. It will cover black. The cadmium yellow in basics, not so opaque. So if you're having a hard time, definitely recommend upgrading to the heavy body. All right, let's take our 1/2 inch flat brush. Oh, I need to clean it out real good. I don't clean my brushes as well as I preach that you should. The one thing I don't do is I never leave them sitting in my water. That's the one thing that I preach to you guys, that I actually take heed of myself. So I just wet it in there and wiped a little bit off. We're going to start adding some green to the ground here. So I'm going to load up with some blue. There might be a hint of black in here, but I think that's pretty dry. Mostly blue, just kind of pulling some out. See how my bristles are spreading? And then when I pick it up, it like sucks the paint up. I likened it the other day to that spider catcher thing. Have you seen that? It's so gross. Where like you have the thing and it comes down over the spider and then it closes. You can take it outside. So it's kind of that same type of thing. When you smash your brush so that the bristles open up like that, when you pick it up, they close and they pick up the paint, just like that spider catcher thing picks up the spider when it closes. Same type of thing. So that's why we don't just come in here and like dip or, you know, pull a ball back and say, I have a big chunk of paint on here. You want to smash it and get the paint inside the bristles. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing with my yellow. Just mix up a green that I like. We'll go kind of mid-green. Not too terribly light, not too terribly dark. All right. Now, you want to decide where you want your ground to be. I'm going to go probably right about in here. So some of this darker area will still be there. I'm using the edge of my brush because I have noticed that I get a nicer blend, a smoother blend. Let's see, let's get just a tiny hint of water there. When I use the edge, I just want to get a crisp line right there. I think, no, I don't want a crisp line there. See, changing my mind. Do that a lot when I'm recording. I'll change my mind and say something else. And so sometimes if you see time lapse and you can see I'm still talking, it's because I'm like, no, that's not what we're going to do at all. So I just wiped my brush off on a paper towel and I'm going to get a little bit more blue-black. So that is the blue-black, tiny point of water. And again, on the edge of my brush, the very tip, I'm going to put it right over that line of green. And see, it kind of fades it, smooths it back. I decided I don't want a hard horizon, because the softer horizon is going to help us create distance. That hard horizon is going to say maybe this is a hill and it's like right in front of us. So that's why we are going to do a softer horizon. Tiny bit more black blue. This part was a little dry, so we're going to, there we go. I like that. I'm going to keep some of that black blue. And right here at the bottom, these corners, because since this is a stormy sky, I want it to look like, you know, when just like a little piece of the clouds breaks and the sun comes shining through and just kind of like shines on one area. Tiny point of water. Just mix it in my brush there. And if the whole ground is very bright, then I think that the sky and the ground won't agree with each other. We'll say, well, the sky looks really stormy, but the ground says it's a bright, sunny day. But by containing that bright green, which that's not as bright as we're going to go, but by containing that bright green, that kind of says that the sun is shining selectively on the ground. I'm just going to go check and see if we have any questions. No, you guys don't have very many questions today. Are you guys all painting along with me? That's really exciting. This is like, I mean, we've done in Patreon with the $15 level, we do the live paintings once a month. And that's fun when you guys paint along with me. But this is like the first actual tutorial where you guys are painting along with me. So that's super exciting. All right, let's get a little bit more going on our ground here. Okay, so my brush is clean. It's pretty dry. I wiped it on the paper towel. And I'm going to come in here and grab as much yellow as possible. Clearly, there's still green in there, so I'm picking some of that up. But I want to start getting a little bit brighter. Okay. Decide where you want the brightness. Now, I want the brightest part of the ground to be where my barn is sitting so that the barn can be really taking quite a bit of light. The barn is our focal point, so I want to make sure that the barn is in the lightest part. If the barn is over in the dark area and then the grass is really bright on the other side, you're gonna be like, what am I looking at? Just a bright yellow patch of grass? So I want the barn over here, so I'm gonna start on this side. And again, I'm just kind of using the edge of my brush. I might grab some matte medium. I know I didn't tell you I was going to use matte medium. And notice I'm not going side to side. I'm kind of swooping down. That makes the ground a little bit more dynamic. I like it to look like it has just a hint of a hill to it. I think I am going to use some matte medium. Nope, that's varnish. I wasn't prepared for this. 1 second. All right, matte medium. If you feel like you can get away without using matte medium here, that's perfectly fine. Just a bit. I love matte medium, and it just helps things smooth so much nicer. Just picked up a little bit. Gets rid of some of these brush marks, and you know, in areas where the paint is already dry, I was getting a little bit of like skittering. You could see the texture of the canvas because it was just kind of covering that. It wasn't blending. But a little bit of matte medium can make it appear that you are blending wet paint into dry paint. So that's why I wanted to use matte medium. We have a little bit of that going on here. I guess I shouldn't be too worried about that part right there because the barn's really going to cover that. Let's get a little bit more yellow. Just picking up yellow on its own there. Just kind of scratching it in. A little point of matte medium. If I get to the point here where I feel like it's just kind of mixing too much or the paint starts lifting, then I'll just stop and let it dry and come back in a minute. In fact, I feel like if I go much more than that, this paint is going to start lifting. So let's go see if you guys have anything in chat. Ask me some questions, guys. That's the best part about doing this live is I can answer your questions live and in real time. So that's really exciting. Whoa, that's really exciting for me. Sorry, I'm just kind of seeing if we have any questions. Oh, Kelly's husband is in awe of the clouds. Thanks, thank you. No questions. Man, you guys. Either I'm really awesome, which, you know, is possible, or you guys are just like in the zone, and I think that you guys are in the zone. In the meantime, I already kind of gave you a sneak peek. Let's go ahead and look at the barn. So clearly I'm not doing this painting. I already had the vast majority of this painting worked out before I found this image. I was just looking for an image of a barn, and I didn't want to have to stop and, you know, start over, rework my entire plan for the week. So I just took the barn out of this, and maybe we'll do the whole image. I really like the background in here, but notice how the ground is really illuminated right there where the barn is sitting. That's very similar to what we're doing in our painting today. So I'm just going to freehand sketch this barn. If you like, the link is in the video description below, like I said, for this image. You can print it out and trace it onto your canvas. It's a pretty simple barn to draw, so I'm not overly worried about that, but I know that some of you have a really hard time with sketching, and I understand that, so that's perfectly fine. I did forget to grab my pencil. I'll grab that, but I need to let the ground dry here before we can do the sketching of the barn. So that's going to take a few minutes. I do have one other element I want to paint before we move on to that. But guys, give me some questions. Is there questions? All right, let's see. Do I always have a reference photo? No, I do not always have a reference photo. If I have a reference photo, I typically tell you about it and give you a link to it. The only time I don't is when I start with a reference photo, but then change it so much that the reference photo is kind of not necessary at that point. Like, I have another painting that I'm working on. I'm hoping to get it done for next week. It's going to be a pretty intense one, I think. I did start with a reference photo, and because there were just a couple elements in it that I really liked, but then I edited it down and I changed it so much, and then as I started painting it, I made more changes to it and more changes to it, so now it doesn't resemble the reference photo in any way, period. So I probably won't share that reference photo for you because it would just be confusing at that point. And guys, you're talking about challenges that are like Patreon and YouTube sponsor specific. So since this is a public video, this will be a public video. I won't go into things like that. How do you make your brush strokes look so natural at the bottom of the painting? In the green part here, you mean? Let me see if I can get back over to it. In this part here, it really boils down to experience, you know, experience and practice. I can tell you that. Also, notice this drip right here. You see that little circle? I know sometimes we get drips on our painting and we're like, get that off of there, and we wipe it, and then all of the paint comes off. So notice I have not touched that drip. It can sit there and think about what it's done, because I know if I wipe it, it's going to remove all the paint. But anyway, it comes from experience, and you know, I know that it's a combination of how much water I use, how much paint I use, how much pressure I use, but I can kind of tell you how I'm doing that, but at the end of the day, it's going to come from muscle memory, and you only get the muscle memory from doing it, from learning. So yeah, the short story is it's experience. The long story is it's brush pressure, amount of paint, amount of water. But then also the type of brush that you're using. You know, if I was using a very soft brush there, I'd have a much harder time. I was using a stiffer brush there, so it was a little bit easier. In all paintings, mine go wonky and kind of straight, like at the bottom of all paintings. So do you mean like the way that my shapes flow here? Just don't be afraid to, you know, make your brush strokes at an angle. If that's what you're asking, I hope that's what you're asking. And okay, let's go ahead. I have one more part to do before we do the barn. And it's what this next part is going to do is kind of help us create the illusion of depth, okay? I want the barn to seem like it's kind of in the distance. I don't want it to seem like it's sitting right here in front of us, like we're about to walk into it. If you do, just put it a little bit farther down on your canvas and make it larger. I'm going to kind of push it back here a bit, so it looks like it's just a bit off in the distance. However, another way that we're going to be able to help create that distance is by putting something between us and the barn. Bless you. So I am going to take my, that's upside down again, isn't it? It's not, I did it right. My number 8 filbert, my poor sad filbert. Do you see that? It's so beat up, but I love it. My brush manufacturer, Greg, he actually yelled at me. He yelled at me a couple weeks ago. He's like, you should be using a brand new brush every time so that, you know, your brushes always look quality and pretty. And I said, but I like this brush. The worse it gets, the older it gets, the more I like it. So I'm going to keep using my ugly brush. All right, I'm going to wet it in my jar and wipe it on the edge. And we're going to do just like a bush. So if the barn is going to be over on this side, I'm going to do a bush over on this side. It's going to be halfway between us and the barn. That means it's not going to sit on the horizon. It also means it's not going to sit here on the bottom edge of the canvas. Because this bottom edge of the canvas, that's kind of where we are. The barn is not quite going to be on the horizon, but it's going to be pretty close. So we want to make sure that the bush is kind of right in the middle of everything. Let's see, I think I need a little bit more yellow. So I'm going to get a green. And again, I think there might be a hint of black in there. If you're worried about it, just get it from the other side. I'm not terribly worried about it. Hint of blue and my yellow. I want kind of a medium green, a little drop of water. Or matte medium, whatever you prefer. Forgot I had matte medium on my plate. All right, let's turn this just a bit. There we go. So when I do bushes with my filbert, I like to start on the edge. So again, that's the flat. I like to kind of start on the edge and just kind of tap. But then every time I tap, I might roll my brush into a slightly different position. Sometimes it might hit flat. And then, you know, just kind of back and forth like that. Don't keep it in the same position and go dot, 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 dot. You're going to get this very mechanical looking plant. So I'm going to start the bush just above the horizon line. I'll just kind of start tapping there and see every time it's in a little bit of a different position, right over that little drip of water. Don't worry about filling it in all the way, because a bush is not a solid green entity, right? There's some little spots where you might be able to see through it. At the bottom here, I'm just taking the very tip of my brush. It's not flat. I'm just using about like that, just the very, very tip to just kind of sketch out the bottom so I don't have these ugly marks like that. I don't like that. There. Much better. Let me get a little bit more. Actually, I want to darken that just a hint. So I'm just going to throw a little bit of blue in there, and I'm pretty sure I picked up some black there, but it doesn't matter either way. I want to Just kind of force a little bit of shadow down here at the bottom. I like that much better. See, sometimes I even do just kind of sketch my brush back and forth. It's random. Don't try to do a real specific brush stroke. I tell you what I'm doing with my brush so that you don't make the mistake of just going dot, 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 dot without changing. You know, do like a few dots in different positions, a little scribble mark, a few dots, a little scribble mark. You can scribble. I'll never, ever yell at you for scribbling. All right, let's go a bit more yellow. We're going to go lighter. And you can bring it up off the edge of the bush. You can come down here onto the inside. Remember again that a bush is a three-dimensional object, okay? It's not flat like this. So the bush wouldn't just have highlights along the edge here and then be dark all through here. It's got mass that comes forward too. So it might have highlights here, it might not. It might have a highlighted bit here, it might have a highlighted bit here. Just think beyond highlighting that edge. There's so much more than just highlighting an edge. See, super random, bring a little bit. Even right there where it's the very darkest, I put a little bit. That helps say that this bush is nice and puffy. He's been growing here for a while and he's very happy about where he lives. Just want to fade out that little bottom bit right there. And if it's super ugly, we can just say, oh, there's another little piece of the bush right there. Much better. A little blue-black. Can you see that? Okay. Just going to scrub that out. I think I'm going to get a little point of matte medium. You could do this with water, but I figure since I've got matte medium here, I might as well use it. There. I'm just going to take my paper towel and just wipe my brush off because I have a lot of dark colors on there and I'm going to start getting a little bit more yellow. Tiny hint of water. And I'm really just going to pull a little point of yellow out. And we'll give it a few little brighter points. Notice my little dots are much smaller now than they were. I'm just putting little accent marks of this yellow. It's getting little bits of that light too. There's nothing in the world like a summer storm. It's the only thing that I like about summer. My little bush kind of looks like a cactus, doesn't it? I'm okay with that. It's funny, it looks like a cactus to me right here, but when I look at it in the screen, I'm like, that doesn't look like a cactus. So remember, take a photo and walk away. Whenever you're not sure what you're doing, take a photo and walk away. I think that's probably good. I think I'm happy with that. Yeah, that's pretty dry. I want to pop the highlight on this part a little bit more. It's not quite bright enough. So I'm going to clean off my brush completely. This is a little tacky. If I got it too wet, that paint would lift, but it will be just fine for this part. I'm actually going to load up with matte medium. Again, you can do this without matte medium. I think that it's a little bit easier, but it's not required. And then some yellow. And I am just going to kind of scratch it on, kind of like we did at the bottom of the bush here. Smooth it down. Even back here a bit. Wipe off my brush, and I just picked up some matte medium. That might be a little much. There we go. And I'm getting rid of those lines. See, matte medium is so awesome. I've tried not to use it a lot lately, because I know for a while there I was using matte medium in like every single video, and some of you are team matte medium now, which is awesome. There's a few of you who aren't, and you know, I always get questions, can I do it without the matte medium? You can do anything you want to do. It may or may not turn out the same, but yeah, you can do it. I just picked up yellow there. My brush is almost dry. I don't have any matte medium on it. Just really want to pop that tiny point of matte medium just to break up this line here. There. I think I'm happy with that. I think that's good. So now that has to dry before we can do our barn. So we have a few minutes. So if you guys have any questions, now is the time. I've got some time to answer some questions. No questions. Oh, Nisa hated matte medium until I explained how to use it. Now she loves it. Good. I love matte medium. Christine had a question. Let's see. Christine, would you explain the difference between what a stiff brush and a soft brush? Explain the difference between a stiff brush and a soft brush. Okay, so it really is the determination between whether you use a stiff brush or a soft brush. It's going to depend on what exactly your goal is. So, for example, let me find, some of you have seen this. Oh yeah, you've all seen it. It was in last week's video. So I have my 1/2" flat brush that you guys are all familiar with, right? It's a nice stiff brush and we all pretty much know what to use it for. I also have a 1/2" bright that's coming. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, what's the difference besides the color? Because they're the exact same length, the exact same size. The difference is their stiffness, essentially. This is a nice firm brush. This is a very soft brush. It's the same as the angle brushes and everything. So I would use these for totally different things. If you watched last week's video where we did the rustic vase, I started using this brush for the shadow and then I stopped and I went to this brush. And that's because the texture of the canvas, it had a lot of tooth to it, a lot of texture. And a soft brush, it doesn't have, the bristles don't have the strength to push the paint down into that texture. Instead, they just kind of skitter along the top of the texture. That's why you could see the texture so clearly in that shadow when I was trying to cover it. But that's also why I used this brush when I was doing the highlights on the vase. I wanted to maintain a little bit of that texture because that helped get a blend and a color variation that I was looking for. So that's why I used this soft brush. The stiffer brush on the vase would have pushed the paint down into the texture a little bit more, and it would have lost a lot of that. Each layer of paint really would have just covered the one before it, so I didn't want that. But I needed the stiffness of this brush to fill in that shadow. So that's really the difference between a soft brush and a stiff brush. The stiff brush is more for coverage, for really covering a large area, digging into texture. A soft brush is more for detail work, for accents, for, a little bit greater control when blending and creating variations in colors. That's how I use it anyway. I'm sure everybody's a little bit different. There's probably people who use stiff and soft brushes totally different than I do. Let's see. No other questions, you guys? Hang on one sec, guys. One other question here. Vince said we have a question, but I don't see... Oh, there's a whole bunch of them up here that I missed. Audra said it would be great to talk about how you go from reference photo to your painting. So we can talk about that when we do the barn. And I don't see the question that you, oh, I see it. Cheryl says, if we don't have a cloud brush, what would you recommend? Whatever you've got. as long as you're comfortable scrubbing with it. Keep in mind that scrubbing with a brush, I mean, especially if you use a soft brush, scrubbing with it can destroy a brush on the first go round. So just be aware of that and make sure that if you start scrubbing with a brush that you're okay dedicating that brush to scrubbing, because you will probably never be able to use it again for like fine detail work, which is not a big deal. I cut brushes all the time. I don't think that there's any reason that you absolutely have to leave a brush in its original form. So yeah, whatever you've got. Is that dry yet? I think it's dry enough. Did I grab my pencil? I'm just like, I don't know whether I'm coming or going right now. So let's go ahead and start working on our barn. I wonder if I can get my image to come up here. I bet I can. Let's see. Please stand by. Image. No. Here we go. Woo! That's pretty big, isn't it? Hang tight, guys. Let's make it a little bit smaller and we'll move it up here. There we go. Okay, so we're going to start sketching out our barn. And so to Audra's question, she wanted to know, about taking a reference image and making it into a painting. So I think that a lot of times we look at a reference image and we're like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to, whatever. And another thing is we also way too often try to make it look exactly like the photo. Why try and make it look exactly like the photo? I think, this is art. This is your time to creatively express yourself. And, having the skills to perfectly emulate a photo is awesome. And that's one thing, but that's not all there is to being an artist. So, use your creative expression and change things that don't suit you. If you don't like that one tree on the right side of the photo, don't put it in there. If you like the barn farther on the other side of the painting, then put it over there. You can do whatever you want to do, and it's, you don't have to show anybody the reference photo and say, here's the reference photo that I did, so they can nitpick it and say, well, why did you do it like this? Well, why did you do it like this? I did it the way I wanted to do it because that's how I wanted to do it. So the very first thing, see, there's that car that blasts up and down the street every single day. He'll be back in like 10 minutes. So the first thing you do is kind of look at the image and decide, do I have skills in my toolbox that allow me to do something like that? With the clouds here, you know how to scrub, you know how to do the smoky background, you know how to highlight in cloudy shapes, you've done fog and whatever before. Okay, I can probably manage that, even though I've never painted anything like that. How am I going to do all of those little details in the barn? That can be a scary part, because we think I have to be able to perfectly put in there every single little line and color and shape. It all has to go in there and it all has to be in the exact same position. It doesn't. I use the image as a reference so I kind of know how a barn is shaped, maybe what position to put it in, what kind of elements are on a barn like this. But other than that, that's it. I have no interest in taking this barn and perfectly executing it on my canvas and making it look exactly like this image. It's not. It's going to look like my barn done the way I want to do it, done with techniques that I know that I am capable of. So that's how you start, by taking a reference image and turning it into a painting. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to zoom you in here so you can really see what we do on our barn. So first thing you want to do is decide where it's going to be placed, okay? Oh, that is still just a little wet. I think it should be okay. I see a lot where we're painting and we're like, bottom of the barn, it has to sit right on the ground. This is a hard line, so that's where the ground is. So the barn is going to sit right on this line. I think you get a little bit more out of your painting and it looks a little bit more three-dimensional when items overlap. So I'm actually going to start my barn kind of down below that line. And I'm going to start with kind of the pitch on the top of the roof. But however you're more comfortable, if it makes more sense to you to say the pitch of the roof is here and I want my barn to come down here and just draw that straight line, you know, sketch it out however you need to. I'm pretty comfortable just kind of starting with the pitch of the roof, which is going to be just a bit above the horizon. So hopefully you can see this pencil. Hopefully there's enough of a pencil glare. So there's the pitch of my roof. Oh, good, you can see that. Bring it up just a tiny bit. Now notice on the barn, it's got a part, it kind of like juts forward and then comes down. So we're going to do that. If you don't understand that, if you can't see it, don't worry about it. Just make it, you know, a pitch like that. I'm going to bring a tiny little piece. You see that straight down. And then I'm going to continue the angle off of the other side. So that says that's got a little bit that juts off of the top of the roof. And we've got the other little side units that they're at an angle, but not as dramatic of an angle as up here. And I'm going to bring that down about to there. Okay, good. I'm glad you can see all that. The same thing pretty much over on this side. It pretty much mirrors the other side. It's okay if they're a little bit different. You know, it's a man-made structure. It's an old man-made structure. It might have been built different on each side. It might be leaning. So don't worry about that. Let's do the roof. So if we look at the image here, it's hard. I keep wanting to point at it to demonstrate parts, but you can't see that. So if you look at the roof, the very top of it, it's not necessarily at a perfect flat angle. And you can tell if you kind of compare it, like hold a pencil up to it and kind of compare that to the bottom of the image, the very bottom of the image, you can tell that the roof tilts up toward the front just a little bit. So as it goes toward the back, it comes down just a little bit. It's not dramatic. Don't draw your roof, the back of it like that. It's almost imperceptible. That might actually be a little bit too flat. I think that's all right. I think it's a little flatter than I wanted it. It angles a bit. And then when I paint it in anyway, I can make adjustments. We're going to do the back. I'm going to bring that actually back a little bit farther. This back line, it mirrors this line perfectly. It's the same angle. So be really aware of that. As you draw this line, pay attention to this line. And you want to bring it down far enough. This line here that goes across, again, it mirrors this line. So it comes down just a bit too. Can you see that one there? That one's kind of hard to see, I know. And again, this line back here is going to mirror this line. This one's kind of difficult. I feel like this is kind of a hard one to get. So I'm going to do this line first, which mirrors this line, which mirrors this line. All of these horizontal lines are going to be the same. And there. I think we're good. We can't really see this corner of the barn, so I'm not terribly worried about that. Let's go see if you have any questions about, actually I'm going to pull this edge down just a little bit more. Just on this side. Okay, I'm going to go see if you have any questions about drawing this. I know it's hard to see, you guys, but I'm going to start painting it in just a second and you'll be able to see. And again, like I said, you can take this image, you can download it for free, and then print it out and trace it onto your image if you like. You'll just want to resize it, make sure that it's the size that you want. So see my barn, it's shaped pretty different. I am going to bring this up just a tiny bit more right there though. It's just not quite there. And then that makes my roof slant just a little bit more too. Good, I like that. Yeah, so let's go ahead and start filling it in, and then you'll be able to see a little bit better what I have going on here. So I'm going to use burnt sienna, and I'm going to use a little bit of cadmium red. Now that's the next part when you are, painting from a reference image. I know, because I get asked these questions all the time, that we get way too hung up on how do I make that color? That color's not right. Or you start mixing something and you're like, oh, my colors are totally wrong. But again, it's art. Just kind of go with your first instinct. That's really what I do. I have no idea what colors are in that barn, and really, I don't care. When I looked at it, I said, it's pretty warm, it's pretty brown. We'll try burnt sienna and cadmium red and see how that does. And I liked it, so that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to use my whoa, you can't see it, there we go. My 1/4 inch angle brush. I wet it in my jar. And I'm just going to loosely mix these two colors. Like always, sometimes it'll be redder, sometimes it'll be browner. I don't really care. Just a red-brown mixture. And then I'm going to come in here. I'm not going to worry about painting in the roof. We're just going to kind of paint in the face and sides of our barn. And you know what I just realized? My barn is in line with my bushes. So my barn looks tiny and my bushes look gigantic. See guys, this is what I was nervous about, is making dumb mistakes like that because I'm talking and I don't take the time to stand back and consider what it is I'm doing. We'll see if we might be able to figure that out. We can figure that out. I'm not going to worry about it right now. Just don't make fun of my barn for ants, because that's totally what it is. It's totally what it is right now. All right. So there you can see the shape of the front of the barn, and then here is the side. Don't worry about the ground. If the color gets away from you on the ground, you can get fancy and cover it up later. Okay, so there's the basics of our barn. And let's see. Oh, that bush is really bugging me now. Yeah, let's go ahead and fill in the roof right now. So I'm going to wipe some of that off. And I'm going to get some white. And I'm going to get a little bit of black. So we're getting kind of a brownish gray color. The roof would be kind of rusty, right? So that's why I didn't worry about washing off my brush. There we go. If it's too black and white, I think it might look newer, and I want it to look really old. Okay, I'm using the chisel edge of my brush to kind of cut along that edge, fill that in. Now, I liked in my reference image, if you notice, this part of the roof is a different color than this part of the roof, the flatter part. And I thought that was weird when I was looking at it, wondering why would they look like they're made out of the same material? Why would one be more red than the other? I mean, and it could be like that because maybe the roof up top was replaced more recently, but I kind of feel like it's maybe because the one on the bottom being flatter might have more standing water on it, so it gets a little rustier. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I'm going to get a little bit more red on that medium or water and fill in this next part of the roof. And I know that kind of blends in with the side right now, but don't worry about that. Just make sure that you can see it If you need to make your color totally different so that you can see it, I'll throw a little black in there just so you don't get confused by what's what. This first color, it doesn't matter because it will change as we go along. You just want to block it in, make sure that you can see it. Okay, so there you can see the barn a little bit better. Let's go see if you guys are laughing at my barn for ants. Somebody asked what kind of pencil I'm sketching with. It's just a pencil. It's just a normal, just a graphite pencil. Yes, Cad Red Medium. Gwen asked if I was using Cad Red Medium. Yep, mixed with burnt sienna. All right, so now we come to the super scary part of trying to get every little detail into that barn, right? Trying to draw every single board on the barn. There's no reason to do that. So let's zoom in just a little bit closer, and that way you can't see that bush that makes the barn look too small. That dumb bush. I'm going to move my water so I can center you a little bit more. We are going to get really into some details, but don't get scared because it's not going to be difficult. Just because a brush stroke is smaller doesn't mean it's harder to do, okay? Let's see if we can come in just a little bit more. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to use my number 2 round brush. So it's very, very small. It's got a nice sharp point. I'm going to wet it in my jar, which you can't really see right now. Just take my word for it. And let's take a color that's just a little bit different. It doesn't really matter how it's different. It just needs to be different. You need to be able to visibly see it. And I think maybe I'll start with some black. That sounds good to me. We'll get some black on this brush. Maybe I'll throw a little bit of my burnt sienna in there. And since we're working details and with this tiny little brush, I just popped it into the water real quick, brought that little drip of water over. I want to make sure that this paint stays nice and smooth, okay? Roll it so that it comes to a nice sharp point. So I rolled it as I brought it out of there. Sharp, sharp point. Now, rather than trying to draw every single plank of wood, what we're going to do is look at the barn and we'll simplify it a little bit. Notice how the planks at the top go up and down. We have some that go this way and then up and down again in different areas. So just kind of make a mental note of where that is and then start doing it. Don't worry about, making very distinct lines between the two sections. So I'm going to start right up here, and can you see? Nope, you can't because my brush dried out while I was talking. My brush pressure is almost nothing. See that little hairline? I'm really using it. Let's see if I can get it somewhere you can see it. About like that. It's barely touching. Put your hand on your canvas if you need to. If you put too much pressure here, this little tiny brush, told you he'd be back. This little tiny brush, so I can do these little hairlines, or if you put too much pressure, you're going to get a fat line. So don't put too much pressure. Hairline, hand on the canvas. Let's just, see, I'm almost just kind of scratching up and down, just scratching. Not trying to draw specific boards. Go back and forth. We're going to do this just like always, guys, with layers. If you don't like the way one layer of lines turns out, it doesn't matter. Just keep going with it so you'll get a consistent look throughout the painting because you'll cover it with the next layer. I'm just doing some up and down ones here. And I know we have some side to side ones here. My brush is getting a little dry. You do want to make sure, like I said, that you keep enough moisture in there. We've got some side-to-side ones here. Just make sure you don't go too far outside of your barn shape. See? Just sketching. I know that looks really terrible right now. Don't worry. And again over on this side. Just kind of sketch them. And on this side as well. Vince, you'll keep me up to date if there's questions?
Yeah.
Okay. And
size brush. I was
number 2, and guys, everything I'm using is in the video description below. All of the materials, paint colors, brushes, everything. Up and down right here on the door. See, and look, in some places it's heavier, and in some places you almost can't see it, and that's fine. That's what's going to help us get that weathered look. I know this looks totally cartoony, and you guys are like, you are crazy. That is never going to look like a decent barn. Maybe it won't. Okay, let's change up our color a bit. Let's go. I'm going to pull out some more burnt sienna. And I think I'm going to grab a little hint of white. Let's get a lighter color. And don't worry about what colors I'm using here. You know, you don't have to mix up your colors the same. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I'm like, let's go darker, let's go lighter, let's add some of this, let's add some of that. All right, and let's do some more. Let's pay attention to kind of where the brightest parts of our barn are, since this is a lighter color. And we're going to do the same thing, just kind of start dragging it through there. Almost no pressure. See, a little bit of water. Oh man, a little bit more water. My burnt sienna is one of those colors that's a little on the thicker side. You know how they all have a little bit of a different texture. So it requires a little extra water to get it going. A little bit under there. I think I want to add some more white. Just lighten it a little bit more. There we go. That's what I was looking for. And notice I haven't gone all the way up into here because I'm going to do something different there. It's all planned out. I know I kind of seem like I'm making it up as I go along. Some of it I am, but I promise the barn is pretty planned out. Just teeny tiny little lines. And don't forget these ones here. Above the barn door. And over here it changes again. I haven't really allowed myself to work in teeny little details for quite a while. I think sometimes I get nervous that you guys don't want to do that it's going to seem too difficult, or maybe it'll be boring to watch, you know, teeny tiny little brush strokes forever. But this one just felt like it really needed it, so I went with it. So hopefully it's not terribly boring. This side, I'm not going to put a ton of this color on. I feel like this side is mostly shadow, but I am going to add just a hint of it. Let some of them overlap. Let it be, you know, much brighter in some areas. If you evenly distribute these colors throughout the entire barn, it's going to look very, very flat. Okay, what color do I want to use next? Let's get a little bit more black. Where's my black? There it is. A little bit of water, pull out some black. And I'm going to come from under the eave here, because notice in our image how dark it is right up there at the pitch, all under the eave, because, you know, it's a dark, stormy day. So right under that edge, and then before it can dry, and just lightly dragging it down again. Right under there, and drag it down a bit. See, now it's going to start looking a little bit more natural. Now, when painting something really small and detailed like this, you guys, you need to remember something, that when you're up close to it in a painting distance and you're seeing every little brush stroke, you may look at it and say, oh, that looks weird. I can see all the brush strokes. It doesn't look like a barn, it just looks like a bunch of color layers. But stand back and look at it, because if this is hanging on a wall, somebody isn't going to come up. They're not going to view it like this. You know, they're going to view it like this, and at that distance, it's going to look different than it looks to you while you're painting it right up close. And just because I just did black doesn't mean that we are done. Doesn't mean I'm not going to come back and add some more colors. But see, now he's getting a little bit of dimension. Over here, this side is going to be quite a bit darker. It's not going to be black, but it's definitely going to be darker. A little extra water whenever your paint's not coming off the way that you need it to. There we go. How are we doing, guys? Anybody struggling? Anybody have questions? So I'm going to define the door. I took a little bit of a dark spot from the edge of the door, and then I'm going to smear it into this side. It just kind of helps define the difference between the door and the rest of the building. See that? As well as wherever the boards change direction, so where we have the ones that go up and down, they meet the ones that go side to side, I'm going to make sure to kind of define that too. So I have a dark spot there. Actually, I want my darker line right here, because that's almost going to feel like a shadow. There we go. Darker bit there. You know what kind of isn't fun about doing live videos? I can't do my little trademarks. That's kind of sad. I like doing those. There. Okay, I'm going to jump over and see how everyone's feeling about their barn, those of you that are painting along with me. Oh, just having a hard time. Don't sweat it, friend. What did I say? I just said how long ago that, you know, just because you're following along with me doesn't mean that it's not going to take a little bit of practice to be able to get something, especially if it's a new concept for you. Just because you're watching someone who knows how to do it and they're explaining it to you and you try it and you have a hard time with it, it doesn't mean you don't know how to do it. It just means it does require some muscle memory. And you don't develop muscle memory by watching someone else trying it once and saying, nope, I couldn't do that. You have to practice. So we don't give muscle memory enough credit, I think. You know, we think, I watched it, I understood it, I should be able to do it. Joan asks, why does the number 2 have a 10 on the brush? So those are, the second numbers are the series. So that's how you can easily tell 2 brushes apart. So for example, so this is the 10 series. All of my rounds are series 10. Just like all of my brights, well, that one doesn't say it because it's a sample. All of my angles are series 40. And I know that that seems kind of weird, but considering like my number 0 round and my number 0 short liner, they look almost exactly the same. They're a little bit different, but you could be confused looking at it and going, which one of these is the round and which one of these is the liner? So that kind of helps you. I can't find my number 0 round. Oh, is that it? Yeah. Okay. So my number 0 round, see it says 10. It's very, very small, but it's kind of got shorter bristles. My number 0 short liner is a 50. It's in the 50 series. And the bristles are a little bit longer, but just at a glance, you might not know which is which. So that helps you. So that's what those are. Those are series numbers. I hope that helps. Barn delayed until I can focus. All right. Okay, yeah, Gwen says I would spend probably at least an hour on the barn details. Absolutely, absolutely. And you have no idea how badly I want to drill into the details on this barn and just spend forever. We are not done. I know it's starting to look better, but it still looks kind of childish. We're going to do a couple more quick layers on the barn, finish up the roof, and then we'll take a look at them and see how it looks. But okay, let's add the windows in, because sometimes I feel like it looks weird and you have a hard time kind of seeing the full image if the windows aren't in. So I'm still using my number 2 round. I'm just going to get some black, just black. And I'm going to put the windows wherever I want. I don't care where they are in the image. So we're going to have one here at the top. If you need to use like a tiny bright to make the little rectangles for the windows, that's perfectly fine. So we have a window there. I think I'm going to put a little window here. And this is a sliding door, so I'm not going to like put another door on it because that's weird. I'm going to put a window here. Just wherever you feel like you would like to see a window. I think maybe I'll even put one on this darker side over here. Okay, I'm going to wash that off. And I'm going to get some white. My white is kind of getting a little bit muddy. I might have to get some more white soon, but we'll make do with what we've got, right? Okay, little tiny bit of white. Let's just highlight the bottom of the windows, so the windowsill and then one of the edges. So almost no pressure, tiny little bit of a highlight there and down this side. Remember which direction your barn is turned. So our barn is turned, you know, like that. So we wouldn't put this highlight on this side of the window. Remember what side of the barn you can see. You can see this side, and that is facing the same way as this edge. Does that make sense? Did I just totally confuse you? I almost confused myself with that one. Anyway, just be aware of which side of the window you're putting your highlight on. So again, I'm going to put one on the bottom here, just very, very lightly. And right there, not on this side. Do another one here. If your little highlight gets out of control, you can paint it out. Don't worry about it. And on this window, because this side of the barn is facing a different direction, I am going to put the highlight on that opposite side there. Okay, so there we have some highlights in our window, and that might be a little too bright for me, but we'll see how it looks. After it dries, the white goes just a hint more transparent, so we'll just let that go for a minute and see what happens. I am going to go back to, let's make gray. So I get some black. I want a very, very light gray. Very, very light. That's too dark. Some more white. That's pretty good. Let's see how that goes. Little extra water. Nice sharp point. Now we're really going to start playing with the highlights on here, really saying what is the brightest part of this barn. Do not be afraid of getting out of control with these highlights, because if they are too out of control, you can take them back later. And see, my barn is not the same color as the barn in the image, and I don't care, because that wasn't my goal. My goal was to pick colors that I felt like worked well in the scene. I liked the barn a little bit redder because I felt that it complemented the green in the grass really nicely. And I'm going to amp up the highlights in mine a little bit brighter to really kind of say that it's got some bright light shining on it. So I don't want to take this bright too much up in here where it's super dark. Right around in here. And just a little bit right there. I'd rather have you put too much highlight on it than not enough. So just remember that. It's easy to take it away. But if you get nervous, say put that bright spot right next to that dark line. To me, that almost says this is like an overhang over that part of the barn, which maybe it wouldn't have. I don't care. I like the way it looks. So see, I'm just telling you things like that so that you know you can absolutely make determinations as you go. Your goal does not have to be to perfectly mimic your reference photo. If we wanted all of our paintings to look like photographs, then why don't we just go take photos? I mean, like I said, it's nice to have the skill to be able to, make picture perfect, super realistic paintings. That skill is super impressive. Anyone who can do that, I'm blown away by them. But that's not what's necessary to make you an artist. What's necessary is, vision and your ability to express abstract concepts through art. I think that somebody can be a picture perfect artist, be able to perfectly capture, a photo and have absolutely no vision. Absolutely none. That is possible. So skill isn't everything. Okay. I feel like I'm almost done with my barn. I'm gonna go back into some red brown because I lost a bit of it. And remember, like I said, you can always make changes. So I'm gonna go red brown. I promise I'm almost done with the barn. Well, with the face, we gotta do the roof, but the roof is much quicker. So some red brown. I'm just gonna kind of poke a little bit of this in again. See, I can take it right over top of those highlights. Because I'm using the color a little bit thinner with some water, the lighter colors still show through a bit. It's almost like glazing. I'm almost glazing these little tiny lines on here. Just wherever you feel like a highlight is too intense, just kind of kick this color over it a little. I'm kind of holding my breath. I'm trying not to so I can keep talking to you, but I find myself holding my breath sometimes when I'm doing these little tiny hairline brush strokes. And I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do next. I don't feel like it's done just yet. Okay. White. Not a lot left, but that should be enough. A little bit of my burnt sienna. Just warm that white up. It's still very, very white. And I'm just going to kind of poke a few of these bright. We'll see how that looks. We'll look at it at a distance in a minute and see what we think. Let's zoom out. Not too bad. I mean, the roof looks completely flat. And the ground is strange, but that's fine. I'm actually pretty happy with the way the highlights and shadows look on the barn. Let's go see how you guys are doing. See what you think. No, oh, Atra gave me a rant. Was that when I was ranting at you, Atra? Okay, doesn't look like we have any questions. All right. Nobody has any comments on my ant barn. Okay, let's finish up the roof. The roof is going to be pretty quick, and then we'll take care of that janky bush over there. Zoom you back in here. Please focus. Thank you. And I like the roof in the barn, how it's like white at the kind of whitish at the bottom, and then it's dark up at the top and kind of red on the other part. So I'm going to stick pretty close to that. I need just a little bit more white paint though, I think. Okay, but again, I'm not going to let it be pure white because the pure white is going to say it's a little bit newer, and I want it to still be kind of rustic. So I'm going to load up with some white. I'm going to grab a bit of this burnt sienna mixture. Just warm it up a little poke of black, a little more than that. Come on, my black is drying out. There we go. We're going to start with that. We're going to call that our white, the white part of the roof. So right at the bottom here, let me see if I can get in an angle that's good for me, but you can still see. I'm going to go across the bottom here, bring it up just a little. But it kind of looks like corrugated metal that moves up. So I'm just going to kind of just very lightly streak that up. Let it break and do whatever it's going to do. I'm just trying to get rid of that line there. It's okay if it's heavier or thinner in other spots. And right here, I want to set that off from the sky really, really well. So I'm going to make sure it's nice and bright right along this back edge. Water. And that's also going to kind of help draw our eye there. Wherever you've got the brightest elements in a painting up against the darkest elements is a point of interest. So we want to make sure that around the edge of our barn we've got some bright colors. Let's throw a little bit more black in there and really darken it up. But it's still not black. See, it's still just like about a medium gray. A little bit of water. And we're going to come across the top edge. And streak that down. A little bit more white. So we're going to kind of push those together. Streak them. Whoa, don't go above the... If you go above your roof, Just take a clean, damp brush. You can just wipe it away. No big deal. Roll some of that off. Make it almost just black. Almost. It's just really for the very top, very edge. There we go. A little extra water. And see, because my line is, the lines that I'm doing here, when they come down, they kind of swoop in a little bit. So it kind of makes it look like the roof is sagging. And I like that. So I'm going to leave that. A little bit of extra water again. Just going to say there's some tiny little lines in here, kind of like we did on the barn. On the front of it, just drawing some very faint little lines for detail, for some texture. And we'll do the bottom part of the roof. I just took that brush, it still has all that gray and whatever on it, mixing it into some, mostly cadmium red, a tiny bit of the burnt sienna, mostly just cad red. I'm going to pop a hint more black in there. There. Let's just make sure this bottom edge is good. Can you see that? No. There. There. And we'll put a little point of white in there. Take it up the edge here, really define it from the rest of the building. And streak it down at the same angle as the edges of the roof. I'm going to take it all the way back. I'm going to let it be darker toward the back. And I just picked up some white. My brush is still a mess. Tiny little bits of highlight here. Am I losing you guys yet? You totally bored? Is everybody painting along, or are most of you watching to paint later, or? I'm just picking up little tiny points of white, just really giving it a nice bright spot right there on that front edge. You can take a hint of it back here, but I don't want it to get too bright, and that is too bright, but just like I've said before, it's fine because I can get rid of it. So I'm going to go back into that black red. And then just kind of streak over it a little, see? Easy peasy. But yeah, I really could spend just, I'm trying to do this quickly so that you get the idea without getting bored of it. Okay, let's really kind of pop the highlights around the edge of the barn on the roof. And I think we're really about done with it. So I'm not cleaning off my brush because I'm a mess. And I'm just getting some white, just a little bit of white right on the end of my brush. And I don't want you to get too out of control with this. Don't put too much pressure. This tiniest hairline you can do, okay? That's what we're looking for. And we are not, our goal is not to fully outline everything. It's to say, I can't see that little peak there, so I'm going to put a little splash of color there. Same with right here, I can't really see that. Maybe we'll just kind of define that from the background just a bit. And the kind of muscle memory it takes to get that super fine pressure, it takes practice. So don't get discouraged. Practice. I know you guys hate it when I say that. But I say it because it's true. A little bit more. Actually, I had to wipe off my brush. It was getting just a little bit too gunked up. Right here, particularly on the corner here. Like I said, we want to make sure that's nice and distinct from the rest of the sky. A little more water. Right there. Right there. I want it to look like coloring book outlines. If you accidentally do like that, you just drag it down in another direction or paint over it with a darker color. I don't think that's too bad. Just a hint right there. And I think that's probably good. Let's zoom out and kind of take in the whole thing on its own without looking at that stupid bush. I should have put my barn just a little bit further back. That's what I get for like talking and planning at the same time. You know, usually when I'm recording, I can stop and consider and really look at it and make the decision and then talk. I don't have that here. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this. It's kind of in my way now. Let's go see if we have any questions. I want to know what you guys are thinking so far. Are you struggling with anything? Whatever. Questions? Deb's painting along. Awesome. Gwen's just drinking some wine. That's cool too. Oh, Eileen is painting and is the opposite of bored. Yes. Thank you, Kathy. Okay. Acha says, my barn looks better now, but the roof is the wrong shape. Is the roof the wrong shape, Acha, based on the reference image, or does it throw off your perspective? Because if it's the wrong shape for the reference image, then that's fine. That's not an issue. You know, if it's changing the perspective, that might be something that you want to look into correcting. And I got some paint on my sky here. I wonder if I can get rid of it. Oh, good. Got it. Very nice. See, just a damp brush, a little bit of pressure. You can get rid of it. All right, let's fix this stupid bush before it makes me crazy, okay? Because it's going to make me angry. And then I think, no, I have one more thing that will take like 5 seconds, and then we're done. Okay, going back to my number 8, which is a series 30. That means that all filberts in my paintbrush line have a 30 on them to help differentiate them from other brushes. Okay, again, I'm going to mix up a green color. So I'm going to get some blue and yellow, just kind of that mid-tone green again. Don't worry about it being exactly the same color as the previous green. All right, a little extra water. And again, I am going to use the corner of my brush. So how I'm going to correct this so that this bush doesn't make the barn, because the bush right now is making the barn look teeny tiny, and that's stupid. I don't like that. So remember I said we want the bush between us and the barn, and right now they're pretty close to the same. So we're going to pull the bush all the way down to the bottom of the canvas and say that we are really standing with the bush. So edge of my brush, and again, it's like a little dab. Sometimes it's a little scribble. I got to get rid of the bottom here. I don't want to leave that. So I need to pull all of this. This is a much larger bush now, and it lives in the front with us. That is going to push With the bush looking large like that and being so close to us, that's going to help create the distance for the barn. But did I mildly panic when I realized that my bush was too close to the barn? Absolutely. I was like, I knew something like this would happen the second I went live. I'm gonna break up this bush. I don't want it to be like in a triangle. Kind of in a triangle right now, and it makes me nervous. Oh, that's a little bit better. Try to avoid patterns, you know. There, see? Now this bush that comes off of the canvas, it's much taller. It goes, not only does it go above the horizon, but it goes above the roof of the barn, right? So if I take a paintbrush and I lay it on here parallel to the bottom of the canvas, the top of that bush is way above the barn. The fact that it's at the bottom here, it says this bush is here next to us, and it's really big, and it's pushing that barn back into the distance a little bit more. Still not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was before I realized that my stupid bush was out of proportion. All right, a little bit lighter. And of course, now I'm not taking the care with the highlights on my bush that I did before because I'm irritated with it. So it's not going to be as tidy looking. But that's okay. It's a different type of bush now. Totally different plant than it was before. Oh, I forgot to do my little shadow color. I'm going to have just a hint of a shadow in there. Let's do that real quick. I just wiped my brush off. We'll get a little blue-black. Just a bit down in here. See, I'm not even lifting my brush. I'm just kind of, it's on the edge, and I'm just kind of like scrubbing, like scribbling back and forth. There, now it's got some shadow. I want to make sure that we definitely have a different color there where it meets the ground. So see, you really can fix anything. I mean, sometimes, yeah, sometimes you have to start over. But really, I think the times when you have to start over because there's no way to fix it are so much more rare than, being able to fix it. It's just that sometimes I think we don't know how to fix something. And so we assume that we can't fix something. But, here's the way I look at it. If you're about to paint over something anyway because you feel like you just messed it up, then what harm is there in trying to fix it? You're about to paint over it anyway, right? So just try and fix it. Worst case scenario, you still end up painting over it. Best case scenario, you fixed it. Or else you learned something, and then, some other time down the road, you're like, oh wait, I know how to do that. Because I accidentally did it that one time when I was trying to fix that painting. I think that's good. Okay. See, did I save it? Did I save it with that? It doesn't look like a cactus anymore. That's true. Thanks for noticing, Kelly. And it really helps push that barn back into the distance, right? Here's one thing I wasn't sure if I was going to do or not. This brush isn't in the materials list. Well, it's not in the materials list at the beginning of the video. I'm going to put it in right now. You can use anything else that you want to use, or you can skip this part, but I feel like I want to do this. So I'm going to go to my, I can't see there, my number 2 filbert. So this is my tiny filbert. Let's turn this up a little. It got a little cloudy outside. There we go. So my number 2 filbert, it's just a teeny tiny little one. Basically what I'm going to do, because the barn, it kind of looks like it's just like plopped on top of the ground. I want it to look like it exists in this scene. So I'm going to make some teeny tiny little bushes just around the edge. They'll be really quick. Zoom in there. And we've got little bits where the barn kind of got away from us and got down into the ground. So I'm really going to do these exactly the same as this larger bush. A little poke of blue. Mix up a green. I'm going to go a little bit darker than that. This is in the distance. Maybe I'll throw the tiniest speck of black in just to gray it down a little, because that also helps it seem like it's in the distance. Okay, teeny tiny little bushes, okay? Try to remember that these are just like little shrubs, so a little shrub is not going to be taller than your building. If you have any places in your building that you feel are just totally wonky, like right here, I don't like the way that the corner of that bush almost, or the corner of the building almost touches the edge of the canvas, but it doesn't quite. Makes me uncomfortable. I feel like I should have either made it so that that corner disappeared off the edge, or I should have pushed it in a little bit farther. So I don't like that. So I'm just gonna tap just a little bush right over that edge. And now that doesn't bother me anymore. I can even bring like a little bit down over here. It doesn't have to be right up against the barn. This corner looks a little strange. Let's just throw a little bush right there. The colors are totally off from my ground, but that's okay right now. Just streak it down into there just a little bit. That definitely needs one because it got out of control right there. Maybe we'll bring a bit down right there too. And we'll say there's a little one poking out from around behind the corner there. And I know you can't see that. We're going to highlight it though. A little bit of yellow. We'll start with this one. Streak out the bottom. Oh, that was way too yellow. Way too yellow. Always streaking out the bottom. See, and that pulls it down into that highlight. I didn't streak out this one, did I? If it's a little darker at the bottom, that's fine. It can say that the plant is throwing a bit of a shadow on the ground. I think we are about, I'm just going to put a hint on that one, not too much. I think we're about done. Let's zoom out and look at that from a, yep, I just threw my brush in my water. Only for a split second. Oh, that looks much better, doesn't it? I pushed my barn into the distance. Yay! No, I really almost freaked out when I saw that. I was like, I knew this would happen the second I went live. I'd totally screw up a painting. But I saved it, and I'm going to sign it in red because that'll be nice and bold. Oh, that wore out, didn't it? There we go. All right, you guys, so we are done, and that is all there is to it. I can't believe we did our first live painting. I'm pretty excited. I hope you're excited. I hope it was okay. I hope that I didn't totally disappoint you. It was 2.5 hours for a tiny little painting. So clearly I need to, zoom in on it. All right. Clearly I need to work on my timing and everything, but I'm pretty happy. I hope that you guys had a good time. If you have any final questions, I'll hang out here for a little bit and answer them. All right, to all of my live people, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And all right, guys, I will see you later. Bye.